Arden, it's great to chat with you today. When I attended BYU nearly 20 years ago, your econ class was the very first class I took in the Kimball Tower, and it was also one of my all-time favorite classes. So thanks so much for coming on the podcast today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Well, you've had an impactful career as a professor, impacting my own life. And as you think back on your academic research and career, are there 2 to 3 simple, practical, underappreciated lessons you've learned that you'd most like to pass along to others?
Well, sure. There's a lot I've learned because there's a lot to learn. But one of the most important things I think is it's easy to think when you're young, especially as you're getting your degree and trying to plan your career. It's easy to think that you can, in fact, plan a career and plan what you're going to do and where you're going to go. And so one of the most important things to understand is that you don't want to get particularly frustrated when things don't go the way that you planned. I mean, for example, I was a farm boy, grew up on a farm and ranch, wanted to study agricultural economics, do things related to agriculture. I never would have believed that I'd be a professor of economics doing environmental economics and even environmental epidemiology and medical research and that sort of thing. It's not something that you could have planned. So then the sort of the second thing I would suggest is that while you don't get frustrated with things not going the way you plan, it's critically important to latch on to the good opportunities that come your way, even if they result in you sort of veering off of your plan a bit. So it's critical to take advantage of the opportunities that you have. Latch on to that low-hanging fruit and use it and do good with it and make it part of your contributions to the world. And then another thing is while you do that, do it. 2 things. One is work hard. I mean, just work hard and enjoying it, even though it maybe veered off what you expected. Work hard and take advantage of those opportunities. And while you're doing that, make sure you do it with complete integrity. Be honest, straightforward, and have integrity in all that you do. Don't try to take shortcuts. Just simply do the very, very best you can, as well as you can, with regards to the opportunities that come your way.
So I love hearing these lessons from you. And again, it's so fun for me to connect with you all these years later. And I'd like to maybe just briefly go through each of these and just share a couple thoughts. You talk about not getting frustrated when your life doesn't turn out the way you planned. I mean, I think back to my career. I was pre-med, had a class on shotgun wounds, decided I didn't want to do that, decided to go to law school, but then decided after I took the LSAT that I wasn't going to go to law school, worked in medical device, worked in real estate, ended up going to law school, ended up not practicing law, and realized once I got to law school, and had I not gone to law school, I would have never realized how amazing school was, because I was always doing sports while I was in school. So in law school, I wasn't doing sports. I was able to focus on school, and I realized this is what I want to do the rest of my life. So it was because of law school that I realized I wanted to do a PhD. In the PhD, I love the PhD, and the job that I wanted wasn't available. So I went and did a postdoc for 3 years. But all of these opportunities that I could have never predicted led me to the perfect job for me right now. As you were thinking back on your career, like, how did you end up going from farm boy to economics professor at BYU?
Yeah, so again, it was mostly by latching on to opportunities, like I said there. I was not a good high school student, and in fact, I was not a good college student, at least the first few years. BYU actually admitted me on academic probation, and I mean, I'm assuming, because my high school grades weren't that good, and I'm assuming it's, my test scores were well enough. They thought, well, we're going to give him a chance. And I didn't disappoint them. I remained on academic probation for 3 full semesters. and they were about to, I was going to get kicked out of BYU, but I went on a mission, and I went to Thailand, and I always knew how to work physically. I loved work, but I wasn't an academic by any means, but I fell in love with the Thai language, and I loved studying Thai, and I loved learning. And it was sort of the first time I got all excited about learning something, even though I was always a book reader. Classroom instruction never thrilled me. So then when I came back to BYU, I was a much more mature person that now had learned how to work doing more, academic stuff. And so I tried various different things. I was in pre-vet for a while. I was in and always things related to agriculture. But then I took a course in economics and thought, wow, this is fun. I mean, in fact, it was this is something I can get A's in without hardly studying, because it wasn't memorizing things. Economics, of course, is sort of more almost analytic gymnastics in a way. And so I loved it. I took an econometrics course, loved it. But so then I thought, I'm going to do agricultural economics. That's my perfect fit, ag and economics. So I got a degree in ag economics, but as I was finishing up, I realized I didn't know anything. I didn't feel particularly educated. I thought when I get a degree, I should be smart, but I wasn't. So I started a master's program, and I realized, again, it was in ag management. I realized I'm not learning what I need to know. No, I wanted to know more. And it was sort of the very last minute, I said, I'm going to try to get into a Ph.D. program. So I applied. There are three top programs in agricultural economics. One was Iowa State, one was Berkeley, and one was Michigan State at the time. And Michigan State and Berkeley never even showed any interest in me. Iowa State sent me application forms, and it's sort of a long story, but I ended up getting accepted, working with a guy as a research assistant, a guy named Earl Hetty, who is one of the most decorated and well-respected agricultural economists in the world. And it was a great experience, and I loved it. So I started. I mean, I was able to do the work. It came fairly easily to me. I graduated very quickly. I got job offers. I ended up taking one at Texas A&M University. I was there a few years. Then BYU contacted me, asked me to apply to a job here. I actually wasn't interested originally. They said, well, at least come out and give us some lectures. And so I did that. And it was in the old agricultural economics department. And turned out I kind of enjoyed being here again. And so we ended up negotiating, and they ended up hiring me here, and we moved back to Utah. And it's worked out well. I was in the ag econ department for a few years, and then they merged all of the economists into one department, which was a very good thing to do. And it was about that time where I was doing more environmental economics and more environmental epidemiology sort of stuff. In fact, what happened was, now I'm getting long-winded, but
Go for it. I love hearing the story.
I was doing environmental economics, which is sort of the subdiscipline of agricultural economics, so old land economics at the time. But I was doing that and teaching a course in an advanced course in environmental economics that required a term paper. And a student, a young woman in my class, came up after class and said, do you have any ideas of what to write a term paper on? And it turned out that Geneva Steel, which was a big integrated steel mill at the time, it had shut down for a period of 13 months and then reopened. A really nice kind of natural experiment, a very simple, straightforward natural experiment. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, everybody's talking about how little Johnny was sick when the steel mill was operating, got well when it shut down, and then got sick again when it reopened. I'd be willing to go and help you get the hospitalization records for pediatric respiratory hospitalizations. Let's treat this shutdown of the steel mill as this natural experiment. I'll get you that data and you can write a paper on it. So I did. I got all of the data, and she dropped out of my class. So I had this data. This is back before electronic transfers of these data. So I had these big computer printouts sitting on my desk. I'm going to enter that data into my computer and just, because I was just curious. So I did that. The results were so dramatically interesting. I ended up publishing that in the American Journal of Public Health, and it caused a big stir, both locally and nationally. And and so it answered some questions, but it resulted in asking more questions. And I started working with a group at Harvard School of Public Health, and ended up going there for a sabbatical and continued to do work. And it just, that having this student drop out of my class and me doing this analysis really has resulted in most of the work I've done for the last 30 years or so. And I've had a lot of really fantastic sort of opportunities that I was able to latch on, and I've tried to live by the principles I just talked about. When they came, I tried to use them, tried to do it, work hard, understand them well, have integrity with regards to doing the work, and it's resulted in a career that, nobody could have predicted. It would be impossible to predict, how this has worked out. But I'm not unique in that. Your experience is a similar sort of thing, right? You really can't predict or plan how this goes. And so that's why I always suggest that don't get frustrated when it doesn't work the way you expect it to. But what opportunities you do get, do them well, work hard, and do them well with a lot of rigor and with a lot of integrity, and things should work out fine.
Yeah, I love hearing these lessons, and just a couple points that I just wanted to emphasize or mention. You found in econ you could get A's without studying. So it's like you've got some natural ability. You don't always have to pursue a career where you have natural ability, but it can sure help. But then, like you said, then you really started working hard in something you had ability at. And you took that work ethic that you had grown up with and applied it to a different setting. And in terms of Geneva, I'm so glad you mentioned this. So
one thing, I'm going to interrupt you though.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's true that what I told you is true. I thought, I can get A's in this without studying, and that's part of why I went in. But I do want to make it clear I didn't get all A's. I was wrong. I had to study hard, and I still didn't get all A's. But that's another story.
Yeah, great point though. I'm really happy you shared about Geneva. So before we hit record, I was just telling you a couple things that I remember from your class, and one of the things that I still remember was this natural experiment from Geneva. So I talk about this. It seems to work its way into every one of my classes, because in most of my classes, I end up spending some time on the scientific method and how do we disentangle correlation from causation, and we run experiments. And let me tell you about this really cool natural experiment that I learned about, 20 years ago. So could you just real briefly share what you found in your natural experiment with Geneva?
Yeah. So what we had data for about a year before the mill shut down, and for the approximate year when the mill was shut down, and then for a year after it reopened. So you have this basically very interesting situation where the primary polluter in the valley shut down for 13 months and then reopened, and we have the data for the period before, during, and after the shutdown. And then what we did is we collected data on the air pollution concentration. So how polluted was the valley with the mill operating versus when it was closed. And then we collected information on pediatric respiratory hospital admissions. And what we found is when the mill shut down, air pollution was reduced dramatically by about half. And then when it reopened, air pollution went right back up to roughly doubled again. It doubled when the mill reopened. Then when we looked at pediatric respiratory hospital admissions, when the mill shut down, they dropped by roughly half. And then when it reopened, they went back up. And now it turns out, I mean, we did fancy econometrics and things on it, but it turns out that you can plot the data and just look at them and you go, wow, that's a pretty amazing natural experiment. And the results were amazing. But then you have to ask yourself, well, could it have been something else?
Yeah, right.
And so you try to look to see if there could be something else. And then so we started doing panel studies where we were having children keep diaries of their respiratory health and doing pulmonary function tests and looking at changes in air pollution with regards to changes in measures of their respiratory health. And we still see these sort of effects. And then we started actually looking at daily mortality counts, and wow, we saw these effects. And then we start doing case crossover studies, and then we start doing these large survival analyses using prospective cohort data. And and at some point the evidence becomes absolutely compelling that breathing, and at first we didn't even know what kind of pollution was causing the problem. So
yeah, what year was this? I mean, this was, you mentioned it earlier maybe, but what year was this?
So the original paper was published in 1989. So the research was, the data was for the few years before 1980. So basically 1985 through 88 was the original work. But then, I mean, then in the late 80s, early 90s, we were doing these cohort studies and time series studies. And then it was in 92 and 93 when I was at Harvard, when I say these were studies the data was all collected by the Harvard Six City studies. So by these Harvard researchers, and I was able to, help with the analyses of that data and interpreting that data. And then that led us, wow, we couldn't believe those results. They were crazy. Again, air pollution was really contributing not just to respiratory disease, but to cardiovascular disease. So that led us, we can't believe it. In fact, we wouldn't even submit the paper for publication until we went to the American Cancer Society. They had a much bigger cohort, and we linked that with air pollution data. And so I was flying down to Atlanta and working with those, trying to make sure we had that right. So we analyzed that data and got comparable results. And then we published both of those papers in the mid 1990s. And then all sorts of craziness breaks loose. And there's these major reanalyses and legal challenges. In fact, the legal challenges associated with the PM 2.5 National Ambient Air Quality Standards based on those time series studies, and this work ended up going all the way to the Supreme Court. They ruled in 2001 or so. So at any rate, this went on, and again, it's another sort of example of I could never have predicted or planned any of that. And from a scientific standpoint, you almost don't want to even try to plan. You want to let the data lead you. You just really want to follow the data and follow the results. And when you, like for the Geneva study, that when it's done, you got to be a little bit skeptical. Maybe there was something else that happened, and you want to sort of rule out other things. So, for example, with the Geneva study, we called it, respiratory health and community air pollution, because we didn't have any clue as to what pollutants were actually causing the problem.
Interesting.
It ended up, it led us to particle pollution, then fine particle pollution, and so here's a case where I'd say even trying to plan and hold on to your plan would do you way more harm than, oh, wow, let's understand this. Let's look at this. Let's let the data lead us to where we need to go. Let the opportunities to lead us where we need to go so that we can be a contributor, in whether it be in science or whether it be in business or whatever it might be.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing these lessons. You could come on here and say, really think hard and plan out your life. But you'd likely miss out on so many opportunities. And so I love your framework of don't get frustrated, and then just look for the good opportunities and latch onto them and work hard. Not everyone will listen to this podcast, but certainly a number of people will listen to this podcast who have never heard about your research on Geneva, and this will be something new that they've learned. And again, this lesson that I learned from you has always stuck with me for 20 years. I wanted to be sensitive to your time, so I think we should wrap up there because you've already given me a few more minutes than I asked for.
I'm going to say one more thing that I thought of just as you were saying that.
Go for it.
So many people say, make sure you do what you love. You get that. I've always found that sort of trite because we don't know what we're going to love 30 years down the road.
Yeah.
I would say, love what you do. Just find pleasure in working hard and doing meeting those opportunities. Love what you do rather than try to find something that you love.
Great, Arden. And that's a message that I'm going to be sharing with my kids as well. And I'm going to encourage them to listen to this podcast, share it with my students. I just really appreciate you taking the time, connecting with you 20 years later. And just like before, I love having you as my teacher. So thanks again.
It's been fun visiting. Take care.